Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome to the latest episode of the Fortress of Rock. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane, as always, glad to have you aboard on this rock and roll roller coaster ride each and every Friday night. Episode 78, February the 10th, 2023. Of course, as always, we start off with the rock and roll news of the world, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen. And I'm gonna brag. I'm gonna brag a little bit here. Got some validation this week on a couple topics, couple performers, couple people. First and foremost, of course, I have ranted, raved, railed about Ticketmaster and the garbage ticketing policies, the fees that they have put forth over the years. And we all know the worst example was probably Taylor Swift, but the Bruce Springsteen dynamic ticket pricing fiasco for his 2023 tour with the E Street Band was a joke, an absolute joke. And now the long time fanzine for Bruce Springsteen, called, of course, Backstreets, are shutting down. They're shutting down after 43 years, not because, of course, publishing or lack of interest in the website or whatever it might be. No, specifically, Christopher Phillips, who has been the publisher and the editor of Backstreets for 30 years, specifically came out and said, we're doing this because we are disappointed and disenchanted over that dynamic ticket pricing policy that Bruce Springsteen signed off on for his 2023 tour. And good for Christopher Phillips. Good for him for standing up as a Bruce Springsteen fan and realizing this was an absolute Bush League move by Bruce Springsteen. And it's time the fans rose up. And I have said this and said this and said this. Bruce Springsteen is not the common man, quote unquote, that he was or pretended to be back in the 70s and the 80s. He is a greedy, arrogant Hollywood celebrity. And I don't care if little Steven Van Zandt wants to defend the policy. These are people who are comfortable. They'll never have to worry about paying their mortgage or paying a car payment like you and I. They'll never have to worry about that ever again for the rest of their lives. So instead of feeling empathy for those of us who want to see them perform, they put forth this kind of stuff, the disdain, the arrogance, the bad attitude. And I applaud Christopher Phillips for this. This takes guts. And I wonder if Bruce Springsteen or anybody in his camp actually stepped up, said anything to Christopher Phillips about, why are you doing this? Why didn't you talk to us? I probably, if I had to bet, and I'm not a betting guy, but if I had to put money on it, I'd say they probably didn't care at all. Because that is what Bruce Springsteen has become. Just like so many other of his bitter, older friends, John Mellencamp, Neil Young, his peers. This is what they've become. Roger Waters, they have all become bitter, nasty, greedy old men. They want to pretend that they care about the art. Not anymore. They don't anymore. 20, 30, 40 years ago, they did. Not anymore. Oh, and speaking of Roger Waters, yes, we have more Pink Floyd news. As much as I hate to talk about Pink Floyd because I can't stand Pink Floyd. Again, the arrogance of Roger Waters never ceases to amaze me. He has said he has re-recorded Dark Side of the Moon, but he did it on his own because he feels like that's his work. So screw David Gilmour and Mason, everybody else involved. I did my version of Dark Side of the Moon. Hopefully, when he releases it, if he releases it, it will flop miserably. But we're not done with the Pink Floyd infighting. I know, we're taking a break from Journey this week. David Gilmour's wife, Polly Sampson, went off on social media about Roger Waters. Now, supposedly, this had to do with the single that the remaining members of Pink Floyd had done, of course, again, without Roger Waters, in support of Ukraine. But I have to give Polly Sampson credit. She called Roger Waters every name in the book without cursing or swearing. And then David Gilmour, of course, that man loves his wife. Good for Polly, good for David. He jumped on and basically said succinctly, I agree with everything she said. And of course, Roger Waters puts a very even-keeled statement out there talking about how he's exploring his options with his legal team. So Roger Waters is allowed to waste his audience's time and money ranting and raving about politics during solo shows, but the minute somebody criticizes him on social media, he's immediately got to start looking into suing those people. How dare you criticize me? Roger Waters has got to be one of the worst, nastiest people on the face of this earth, rock and roll or otherwise. Polly Sampson is my new hero. Now, unfortunately, here at the Grammys this past weekend, we all know Christine McVie passed away. Again, not a big Fleetwood Mac fan, but you got to acknowledge the greatness of the album Rumors, the impact it had in the 70s, the overall impact of Fleetwood Mac. But Mick Fleetwood has basically said they're done without Christine McVie. Even though you still got Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham, and of course Mick Fleetwood and John McVie still around, it sounds like the heart of Fleetwood Mac has been ripped out. And of course, Lindsey Buckingham has distanced himself from the band. Now, he's done this before. He could come back, but again, acknowledging the impact and the importance of Fleetwood Mac, it looks like they are done. Now, I couldn't make it all the way through that Disney Plus Beatles documentary. about the recording of Let It Be, Get Back. It's just too much, too long. Now, if you're a diehard Beatles fan, I get it. You're going to lap it up. You're going to eat it up. I would do the same thing if they had a documentary like that about Van Halen. So I'm not criticizing, but for a wider audience, even a diehard rock and roll fan like me, to sit for hour after hour after tedious hour watching that was just painful. And again, I had to give up about halfway through. I couldn't deal with it anymore because it served no purpose. Now, this documentary involving Paul McCartney, I might be interested in, especially if it's not 9, 10, 12 hours. Man on the Run is in the works, a documentary detailing Paul McCartney's transition from the Beatles through his solo career into Wings, the late 60s through the 70s. And I've always thought Paul McCartney's solo career was the one solo career out of the four Beatles that was worth talking about, listening to, following. George Harrison probably second. Sorry, John Lennon fans, I don't like John Lennon. I never have, and I never will. I don't care. I will let you know more when I find out more details about when Man on the Run will be released and on what platforms, if not in the theaters. All right, we mentioned earlier the Grammys. I don't know why I'm bringing up the Grammys, because overall they're a joke. Just like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they don't care about fans like you and I. It's a popularity contest. And all the awards that matter to people like you and I were awarded off camera. The Lifetime Grammy Achievement Awards, the Special Merit Awards, went to Nirvana and Ann and Nancy Wilson of Heart. And then we move up a tier. Now, in the past, these awards would have been presented on the TV show, but again, as much as they try to destroy rock and roll, we will not let that happen. But Ozzy Osbourne wins Best Rock Album for Patient Number 9. Also wins Best Metal Performance for Degradation Rules. But again, the thing that I find completely embarrassing is Best Rock Song, Best Rock Performance go to Brandi Carlile. Huh. Please tell me the people that vote for the Grammys are in any way, shape, or form in touch with what rock and roll really is. Now, this to me is weird, borderline embarrassing, tied into Ozzy Osbourne in a way. In Birmingham, England, in September of 2023, we will be getting Black Sabbath, the ballet. Yes, I said that. Black Sabbath, the ballet. What? Who? What? Tony Iommi, of course. who contributed to Ozzy's Grammy Award-winning album, Patient Number 9, thinks this is a great idea. This could be the most embarrassing, ridiculous, stupid idea in the history of rock and roll. One last time, Black Sabbath, the ballet. Imagine a couple people in tights, leotards, dancing to War Pigs. Yeah, that's how I feel too. All right, as always, we've got tour news. Carlos Santana obviously recovered. Good for him. Glad to hear he is back up and about and ready to rock and roll again. After his incident recently, his health incident, he has a Vegas residency set up September and November this year in the House of Blues in Las Vegas. So if you're going to be out there and you want to see Santana, go ahead and book your tickets now. Pat Benatar, Neil Giraldo, doing an East Coast tour, March through April of 2023, 9 dates. Had a shot at seeing him recently, didn't go. I am not happy with her decision. I don't know if she has backed off on it, but the nutsy cuckoo snowflake opinion of hers to not play hit me with your best shot because it implies something about gun violence. Whatever. And then finally, Duran Duran going on the road with Chic. May through September, 25 plus dates. I have already on this show previously professed my love for Duran Duran, my unrequited love in the 80s where I couldn't admit that I liked them just because it was not cool. Well, now it's cool, so go check out Duran Duran in a city near you this summer. We've talked about the Hall of Fame fan voting, of course, which counts for 0.00001% of the total vote. I'm just kidding. I think it's only 0.1 or 0.01. As we tape here on February the 10th, your 5 top vote getters, those are the ones that will count for 0.0000001% of the overall vote. And this is why I have no faith in anybody. Hopefully, who I'm speaking to out there, my audience knows this is ridiculous. And I don't blame you if you don't bother to vote. I do vote every day. I'm trying to make some semblance of a difference. But this is your top 5 right now. Cyndi Lauper, George Michael, Warren Zevon, Soundgarden, and Willie Nelson. Iron Maiden just outside of the top 5. The White Stripes not even close. What are we doing? What are we doing? Get Iron Maiden in the top 5. Get the White Stripes in the top 5. Let's start acting like this is rock and roll. Finally, of course, this is probably going to become a regular news of the world topic as our guitar heroes, our singing legends pass away. But we've got 3 people to talk about in terms of rock and roll deaths. over the past week or so. Charlie Thomas of the Drifters, Phil Spalding. You might not recognize that name. There was a brief period in the 80s where there was a supergroup called GTR. Bad name. Bad name. Of course, GTR meant guitar with all of the vowels pulled out. But you had two great guitar players, formerly of Yes, Steve Howe, Steve Hackett, were in GTR, and they had a big hit with When the Heart Rules the Mind. Phil Spalding played bass in GTR. He passed away here recently. And then, of course, again, more pop than rock, but you cannot help but acknowledge the fact that one of the great songwriters, especially in the 70s, was one Burt Bacharach. Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. What a fantastic song. Legendary composer, songwriter Burt Bacharach is gone. So, of course, our thoughts and prayers go out to the family and friends of Burt Bacharach, Phil Spalding, and Charlie Thomas. And that is going to do it for News of the World here on February the 10th, 2023. But we have got, so much more to go through. Breakdown is next. Music from the Winery Dogs, The Hold Steady, and Peter Gabriel. Got to travel back in time and got to let you know what's coming up in the weeks and months to come. So much more to discuss here with you on the Fortress of Rock this Friday night. Hang out through a quick promo, and I will be right back. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Fortress of Rock podcast with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Of course, that was segment 1, the News of the World, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen, where we look back at the past week in rock and roll and all the news and all the controversies that you deserve to know about. Next up is the heart of the show, the meat and potatoes, Breakdown, where we are going to review all the new songs, all the new albums, all the new concert tours, the shows that I've seen personally. Stay tuned for that. Of course, we're now available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Hang out, kids. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Fortress of Rock here, segment 2. As always, each and every week, Breakdown, our tribute to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. The best new music, albums, songs, concert reviews. Episode 78, taping here on February the 10th, 2023. Now we're getting through, almost done with the rough patch each and every year, December, January, holiday time, the winter months. We don't get a lot of new music, but we are pushing through. We're almost there. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Once we get to segment 4, wrap it up, we'll go into more detail about some of the great stuff we've got coming up at the end of February and early March. Now, in no way, shape, or form am I demeaning the bands and the performers we're going to talk about today. That would include our album review of the week, The Winery Dogs. Their third album, creatively titled 3, note sarcasm, Now, I've been on board with the Winery Dogs pretty much since the beginning. When I had Sirius XM, I'd listen to Eddie Trunk's show. He's a big, big fan of the Winery Dogs. Of course, they're kind of a latter-day supergroup. You've got Richie Kotzen, who has played with Poison and Mr. Big. You have got Billy Sheehan, who has played with Mr. Big and was the bass player in David Lee Roth's solo band right off the bat, Eat 'em and Smile, with Steve Vai and with Greg Bissonette. And then, of course, you've got Mike Portnoy on drums from Dream Theater, a power trio. And I've been pretty happy with their albums, and 3 is no exception. So, of course, as we always do here on the Fortress of Rock, let us go track by track through the Winery Dogs 3. 10 songs. Now, we reviewed a couple of these songs, and it would be the first 2 on 3. Don't get confused with the math there, kids. First track is Xanadu. Very, very good, solid lead-off track, and of course it was the first single off of 3. Very catchy chorus. Second song on 3 is also the second single. That would be Mad World, another song we've talked about here recently. Mad World has grown on me the more I've listened to it, not as immediately catchy as Xanadu, but it's a very nice 1-2 punch to start off the Winery Dogs' third album. Track 3 is Breakthrough. It's not bad, but it's not great. One of the weaker tracks on the album. Here early on, it's a little bit of a misstep, kind of breaks the momentum. But the Winery Dogs get it right back on track 4 with, for me, arguably is the best song on the album, Rise. Now, when we get done with all 10 songs, I will give you my overall criticisms, positives, negatives, all that. But let's just say Rise has Richie Kotzen's finest moment on guitar in terms of the riff. For Rise, the guitar riff is fantastic. One of the best I have heard in a long, long time. Rise is a very, very solid song. Again, possibly my favorite on 3. They follow that up with Stars. I like Stars as well. I think the 1-2 punch of Rise and Stars actually is a little bit better than that opening salvo with Xanadu and Mad World, even though those were the first 2 singles, if we can call these songs singles anymore, the first 2 releases. I think Rise and Stars tracks 4 and 5 are better as a 1-2 punch. They're a little bit meaner, a little bit darker, but not, we're not going into death metal territory or anything like that. Obviously, anybody out there who's ever listened to the Winery Dogs knows they are a hard rock band, but they do not delve into metal. But Rise and Stars are a little bit harder, just a little bit, than maybe Xanadu and Mad World. Then track 6, The Vengeance. Not one of my favorites. Momentum grinds to a halt again. Then we get track 7, Pharaoh, track 8, Gaslight, and things pick up yet again. Pharaoh is, again, like Rise, like Stars, a little bit darker. And when I say darker, I'm saying they're not trying to construct a hit single or something goopy for the women. These songs come as close as I believe they can come to the true core, the true nature of what they're trying to do as the Winery Dogs. So Pharaoh is really good. Gaslight, very, very good. Now Gaslight's a little bit more accessible. Got a little bit more of a catchy chorus to it, but still, it's got that rebellious nature to it. Don't gaslight me, as Richie Kotzen sings in the chorus. And then the song that probably keeps the Winery Dogs' third album from becoming a potential top 5 album for the year is the awful, terrible, bluesy ballad, Lorelei. Now, as I look through the track names, and we haven't even gotten to track 10 yet, The Red Wine, but you look through some of these song titles, and these are all original compositions, but initially, when I saw that they were doing a song called Mad World, I thought, oh, please, please don't tell me they're doing another take on the Cat Stevens song, because I believe Mr. Big also did a version of Mad World. Xanadu, of course, Olivia Newton-John, and ELO. It's The Red Wine, not Red Wine, but still. And then you get Lorelei here, track 9, and again, until you look at the songwriting credits, you're like, is this a redo of the classic Styx song? Now, this is the one time out of all those songs I mentioned that I wish they had done a remake of the original or the song with the same name. Because the Winery Dogs, their Lorelei is not good. Not good at all. It's clunky. It's awkward. It is the one really, really, really bad song on this album. And then finally, I just mentioned the final track, track 10, is The Red Wine. Very cool, very nice closing song. For an overall very, very solid effort from the Winery Dogs. Now, I want to look at a couple songs here, and I've read some reviews. I do like to see what other people are saying. Just, of course, I'm a human being. I want confirmation. Yes, we all know about confirmation bias. We want people to agree with us. And then, of course, we get upset when people don't. But sometimes I'll look at album reviews or movie reviews just to see if there's anybody else out there who kind of feels the same way I do. So I don't feel like I'm completely going loopy, nutsy, cuckoo crazy. So I did find a couple reviews on Amazon. Now, number one, I applaud the people out there, and I know when you're reviewing an album, you should not take other factors into account. It should be a straight review of the album itself, but there are a handful of people out there on Amazon who completely and totally agree with me. I did not buy this CD for one specific reason and one specific reason only, is because the price point on this is way too high for a CD. They want $18 on Amazon for the Winery Dogs 3. And there are a lot of other people out there, probably, hopefully, some of you who listen, who are dropping these comments and feeling the same way that I do, that that's just way too much to pay for a CD. I think $13.99 is about the highest I am going for a CD in this day and age. And $18 for the Winery Dogs is just way too much. It's pathetic. and I don't like it, and I will not buy the CD, even though I do enjoy it. And of course, you can tell I'm going positive on my review here. But $18 for a CD, pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. I don't know if you blame the record label, the band, all of them. But now another faction of people who reviewed the Winery Dogs agree with me that this is a show-off album. And I think I mentioned that when I reviewed the second single, Mad World. This is a show-off album where Richie Kotzen on guitar and Billy Sheehan on bass just love to go crazy and do these little show-off solos throughout the songs. The guitar stuff is less intrusive to me. You naturally assume lead singer, guitarist, they're going to be the ones up front. But Billy Sheehan on Mad World, Rise, Gaslight, and The Red Wine especially, they just throw these 15, 20-second bass solos in there for him so he can show off. And I'm sorry, but if your name is not Geddy Lee, I don't want to hear you showing off on bass. And this includes my favorite bass player, Michael Anthony. You don't do this unless it's a concert. Concerts are different. Of course, you're going to have drum solos, guitar solos, and occasionally, when you're dealing with a big name on bass, a bass solo, but not on a recorded, produced album. So that's one thing that irritated me a lot about 3. Now, the other thing, it's not a negative, it's not a positive, it's just an observation. But Richie Kotzen, especially on this album, and I'm sure if I go back and listen to their first 2 albums, I'll feel the same way. It's been a while since they put out an album. But and in no way, shape, or form am I comparing Richie Kotzen to my all-time favorite vocalist, Chris Cornell. But if you listen to Richie Kotzen sing, he sounds like a double-A version. If I want to use a baseball analogy here, single A, double A, triple A, major leagues. Chris Cornell's major leagues. Kotzen's about 2 steps down, but his voice sounds eerily similar at times to the late, great Chris Cornell. So that's something more for you guys to listen. You check it out. You let me know what you think. Of course, you can go on the Facebook page. You can drop a comment on our podcast page. So in the end, I did like the Winery Dogs 3 a lot. I did. Again, there are a couple songs on here that probably keep it from getting to that upper level, that best of. Definitely an album I'll listen to again and again. And if Amazon ever drops the price, maybe I'll buy it and add it to my collection along with their first 2 albums. But in the end, I recommend 3. Great album from the Winery Dogs. Again, a few missteps, but nothing that would tell me that this band still doesn't have a solid future if they want to keep going. Still seem like they are rolling along very well creatively. So, positive album review leads into our 2 singles. Again, I use that term as an old school rock fan. I don't know if it's appropriate anymore, but finally, we're getting to the first single from The Price of Progress, the new album from The Hold Steady. The first song is Sideways Skull. Now, The Hold Steady is a very hard band to tolerate for many reasons. Now, I have stuck through them. Friend of mine years and years ago, who I'm no longer in touch with, he was the one that recommended them to me. Very, very knowledgeable, smart guy when it comes to music. So every once in a while, he used to drop pearls of wisdom, nuggets of wisdom when it came to new bands, because he knew it would infuriate me waiting for years and years for my favorite bands to put out albums. So he mentioned the Hold Steady. And I believe this was probably, we're probably going on 5 albums back, because the Hold Steady are one of the few acts out there who put out new music every couple years. Very, very religiously, very dependably. I have my problems with them, but I also try to recommend them to other people just like my friend did to me, because there is something there. There is something with this band that is very cool, that is awesome, that is engaging. They've got a Springsteen feel to them musically. Craig Finn, of course, is their frontman, their singer-songwriter. He's got a handful of solo albums out, which sound similar to the Hold Steady, but Craig Finn seems to be locked into this one pattern of music. And it doesn't seem like they want to break out or expand from it. And this is one time where I'm normally the guy who says a successful band, a band that's been around for a while, should try to refine their sound, try to perfect their sound. We've talked about U2 recently. Def Leppard has had missteps in the past where they've tried to veer off their path. In this case, I'm going to do a 180, and if it makes me a hypocrite, so be it. But the Hold Steady need to try to do something different, because their songs, their albums are starting to sound the same over and over and over again. Now, again, as I noted, they have something. If you listen to Craig Finn's vocals, his lyrics, they're fantastic. They're detailed. Could be the most detailed lyricist out there. Rock and roll references, pop culture references, pepper all of the Hold Steady songs. But again, it seems like at times you listen to a Hold Steady album and you're just getting hit over the head with a ball-peen hammer, because it's the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, with very little variance, very little change. Now, my daughter, she's 21. She is very, very picky when it comes to her music, but she is a music fanatic like me. I briefly got her into the Hold Steady. So for an album or two, she liked them, but I think they wore on her, and she drifted away from them as well. Now, Sideways Skull is no different, unfortunately. It's the same pattern that we've got from the Hold Steady, from the album before, and the album before that, and the album before that. And I would kind of like to see them live and in concert, but at the same time, I think it would infuriate me, because, again, all the songs sound the same. And I love to read a lyric sheet once or twice when I've got a new album, especially when it's an album that's got some depth to it in terms of the words, the lyrics. But I feel like with the Hold Steady anymore, you've got to have the lyric sheet in front of you all the time. As Craig Finn's stories, his stream of consciousness lyrics just seem to get lost as the band just rocks around behind him. And again, he makes the random references to Robert Plant or Queen or whoever it might be. So this is kind of an overview review of not just Sideways Skull, but the Hold Steady in general. Again, this is another one where I would love to hear from you guys, love to hear your opinions on this. Let me know what you think about the Hold Steady. Am I missing something here? Or do they need to break away from the pattern that they've established over the last decade plus and try to venture into some new and different territory? Now, finally, here on Breakdown, speaking of somebody who's never afraid to venture into new territory, yes, I finally have gotten around to listening to Panopticon, the first release from Peter Gabriel's long-awaited upcoming album I/O. Now, we've discussed the fact he's doing his Peter Gabriel thing where he's releasing songs only on full moons until the whole album comes out. And of course, he's releasing all these songs with both a dark side mix and a bright side mix. So there you can kind of see what he's going for here. Must have been talking to Roger Waters, who we discussed in segment 1, Dark Side of the Moon. Get it? See how it ties in? Now, I'm not gonna spend my time, waste your time trying to delve into the meaning behind Panopticon. I'm just gonna rate it purely in terms of musically. Is it listenable? Is it halfway interesting? Is it decent? Because we all know Peter Gabriel is long ago left the glory days. And some people would say he sold out with songs like Sledgehammer. But I thought personally he found a decent balance, a very solid balance between being true to himself and his quirky nature and actually being accessible and, yes, being popular. Panopticon is not so far out there that you can't enjoy it musically. It's moderately catchy. I didn't hear a lot of difference between the dark side mix and the bright side mix. Now, I wasn't going to sit here and listen to them back and forth, 8 or 10 times. Just not going to do it. I got better things to do with my life, and you do too. But overall, it's not bad. It's not a bad song. Again, my standards are very high. The music snobs out there who think Peter Gabriel is a genius, good for you. I don't. I think in many ways, again, referring to the rock and roll villain du jour, Roger Waters, I think they're similar in that they are pretentious and arrogant. They can't play well with others. We've seen that with Roger Waters and Pink Floyd, and we, of course, have seen that with Peter Gabriel in Genesis. Now, of course, nobody is going to criticize Peter Gabriel for not wanting to do some of the radio pablum that Genesis did towards the end, because Phil Collins had basically taken over and the dollar signs were cha-chinging, cha-chinging in his head. But there's always got to be a balance. And that's where I think a lot of these artists lose sight of it. They lose their focus. There's a balance. You want to be able to connect with your fans. You want to be able to reach out to as many people as possible. Yes, but again, being true to who you are musically. And again, going all the way back to when Peter Gabriel was massively successful with So, In Your Eyes. Again, we talked about Sledgehammer. That was a perfect balance, in my opinion, at least, my opinion, that Peter Gabriel reached, where I think he was being true to himself. He was using wildly different sonic landscapes, but he was creating massive hit songs that appealed to millions upon millions of people. And I still don't understand why that's considered terrible and awful and evil. Again, as long as you're not selling out. And again, I'll give Peter Gabriel right here as we wrap this up more credit than I will give to Phil Collins, even though in the end I probably like the Phil Collins Genesis music better. Phil Collins did sell out. Phil Collins put together some of the most awful, terrible, nasty power pop ballads ever in Genesis or as a solo artist, where Peter Gabriel, the one time he kind of went in that direction with In Your Eyes, created a beautiful, gorgeous song that I think most rock fans to this day, we've got Valentine's Day coming up, think is one of the most beautiful, gorgeous, non-sellout love songs of all time. Didn't hurt, of course, that it was in the awesome movie Say Anything. So Panopticon is a nice, cautious step forward for Peter Gabriel, maybe kind of, sort of, getting back to his glory days, but it's not even close to a full-fledged return in terms of popularity and accessibility. So that'll do it for Breakdown. Segment 2 is over. Of course, the weather here where I am is fantastic. February, normally this is awful, pushing 0 degrees, and we are in the 50s. So Doc Brown has got the rock and roll DeLorean at the curb outside, ready to go. We're going to travel back in time in segment 3 after a quick promo. I Want to Go Back is next, kids. I'm the Maestro. See you in a few. All right, now that we've looked at the current state of music in our breakdown segment, it is time to climb into the DeLorean and travel back in time to look back at moments in rock and roll history, birthdays, deaths, anniversaries of song and album releases. It is time for I Want to Go Back, our tribute to Eddie Money. Stay tuned. And as always, we're on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcasts. All right, Doc Brown and I are in the rock and roll DeLorean here on February the 10th, 2023, getting ready to head back in time. Yes, it is segment 3 on the Fortress of Rock. I Want to Go Back. Of course, our tribute to the late, great Eddie Money. Anniversaries of classic album releases, moments in rock history, birthdays. And of course, you know where we are because you found us somehow as you hear the sound of my voice. But we always like to point out at this point in time in the podcast that you have options. You can find The Fortress of Rock on Spotify, Anchor, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Stitcher, Amazon Music, and Audible. And of course, don't forget to check out our Facebook page. Every Sunday is New Music Sunday, where we post a music video for your enjoyment, usually tied into our last segment, Breakdown. Not sure what I'm going to go with yet this week. Believe it was 2 or 3 weeks ago I had posted Sideways Skull. But we'll see. We'll see where we go. And of course, you might have noticed I skipped the Weekend Rock Project. No, we're still doing it every Friday afternoon. On our Facebook page, we ask a rock and roll survey question. Not some lame choose A, B, or C type of question, but one that we want to know what you think in depth, in detail about topics. Sometimes it's fun stuff, just a word. You find your favorite song with that word in the title. We just got done with a long 5-week stretch talking about live music and concerts. I will not tell you what this weekend's rock project is about yet, because it would spoil the surprise for one of our upcoming anniversaries. So let us get into it. As Doc Brown gives me the stink eye and says, "Stop yapping, let's get into it. The time stream awaits." All right, we're going to go back already, all the way back. We're skipping the 90s, skipping the 80s, going all the way back for our anniversaries to February the 10th of 1979. One of the most polarizing hit songs of all time when it comes to rock and roll. One of the last songs that you could maybe possibly consider disco. Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Rod Stewart put out Do You Think I'm Sexy? This was the day, though. Again, February the 10th, 1979, when Do You Think I'm Sexy started its run at number 1 on the U.S. singles chart. Now, I was never a big Rod Stewart fan, never got into him. Very, very few of his songs. Here's an odd way that I can tell I'm not a big fan, is that if you're one of my top tier favorite artists, group, performer, I'm going to have your full albums or CDs or cassettes, whatever it might be. If you're the next level down, I've probably got your greatest hits somewhere, because you got 7, 8, 9 songs that I really, really like, but I just don't want to gamble and take the time, or I already know that I'm not going to like the deeper stuff on your albums. And then below that is where you would find Rod Stewart for me. I do not want his greatest hits. He doesn't have enough songs even to that level to appeal to me. We talked recently about the passing of Jeff Beck and the great song that he did with Rod Stewart, People Get Ready. That's a great song. Now, when I was really, really young, Maggie May was popular. And of course, the meaning at the time for me. I was a little too young to really know about or care about the younger man, older woman affair thing. The song itself just didn't do it for me. And to this day, I still don't care all that much for Maggie May. Now, when he, among with dozens and dozens of other 70s, 60s bands who had their resurgence during the MTV age in the 80s, I liked Young Turks a lot. I thought Young Turks was a really catchy, good song. But again, is it enough for me to really become a Rod Stewart fan? No. No. And in the end, I'm going to side with the people who are ultimately embarrassed by Do You Think I'm Sexy? And this is coming from a guy who has admitted, I love Duran Duran. I really like George Michael and Wham. But Do You Think I'm Sexy just might go a little bit too far. But on this day in 1979, the number one song in the US was Do You Think I'm Sexy? And now, thank God, we get to arguably the most important anniversary here, not only of this week, but maybe of this month. February the 10th, 1978. 45 years ago, as we taped The Fortress, the debut album from Van Halen was released. You guys all know out there I am giddy about this. Absolutely giddy. I already listened to the album today. Had to give it its props, its due. 45 years out from Van Halen hitting the record store shelves. And of course, I could talk for hours and hours and hours about Van Halen. I could probably talk for hours and hours about this album. I will actually be, in many ways, a contrarian in that I do not think Van Halen 1, if you want to call it that, is flawless. I think On Fire is legendary a song as it is to many out there in the Van Halen community. I'm not a big fan. I actually think it's one of the weaker Van Halen songs ever. To me, that's the one flaw on the first Van Halen album is On Fire. In many ways, the song is comical to me, as they're all sitting there going, On Fire! And they're all singing off key, and it just sounds terrible to me. But the rest of the album, flawless. Absolutely flawless. This is why I will always put Fair Warning ahead of Van Halen 1. This brings us back to the Weekend Rock Project on our Facebook page. Check in on that. On the 45th anniversary of the release of the first Van Halen album, we ask for your favorite Van Halen songs. I've already put mine out there. I did take my favorite, one of my three favorites from the first Van Halen album. That would be Ain't Talking About Love. So before we leave this Van Halen Love Fest, one other piece of business to conduct. A lot of the ideas for segment 1, News of the World, as well as this segment, I want to go back. You got to do some research, kids. You got to do some research. This stuff is not just going to spring from your head. I am not Rock and Roll Rain Man. So I have sources, and those sources include the Van Halen news desk, of course, especially when it comes to this particular anniversary, thisdayinmusic.com, and ultimateclassicrock.com. But again, always keep in mind the opinions expressed on the Fortress of Rock are mine and mine alone. So don't blame them when I go off on your favorite band. It's on me. Moving back to February the 10th of 1972, David Bowie begins his Ziggy Stardust tour in London, England. Now, I like David Bowie more than I like Rod Stewart, but again, using the scale of popularity for the Maestro, Bowie moves up to that second tier, but I've never really had any interest in diving into his catalog. His greatest hits are fantastic. I know there's a lot of snobs out there screaming, blasphemy, blasphemy. How can you judge an artist if you haven't heard all of their work, all of their songs, all of their albums? There's only so many hours in a day. I've got movies to watch. I've got TV and streaming shows to watch. I've got a kid in college. Got to pay the mortgage, got to pay the bills. Sorry, but David Bowie's full catalog, just like Rod Stewart's, fall by the wayside. Speaking of which, moving back 1 year to February the 10th of 1971, one of the most influential, legendary albums of the 70s came out on this day, 1971 again. But it's an album that for me, I missed the boat on because, again, it came out really before I started to get into music. And to me, it never held that kind of influence, that kind of magical influence like a Beatles album did or a Who album from the 60s did. Or even something from the early 70s from the Doors or the Doobie Brothers. Carole King's Tapestry was released on this day in 1971. And to me, this is kind of a one-hit wonder type deal, and this again will offend the rock snobs out there because of the comparisons I'm going to make. To me, Tapestry is like the debut album from Christopher Cross, where it captured the imagination of the radio programmers and the audience and the fans. It was a huge hit, and it had massive hit radio singles. But what was the lasting effect? Now, you can argue Tapestry obviously has a longer lasting effect than Christopher Cross. But I could also pull out something like Appetite for Destruction, which I think we would all agree much more influential, a landmark album, which I think deserves much more credit than something like Tapestry does. When we're talking about acts who only put out 2 or 3 albums before their shelf life dissipated. Now, you can again argue Guns N' Roses still touring, they're still around. We're not getting new music from them. And I still don't count Chinese Democracy because that was basically an Axl Rose solo album. All right, finally here, before we move on to birthdays, let's have a little fun. And let's go way, way back in time to February the 10th of 1942. It's not really rock and roll, but bear with me here, and I'll explain how this ties back around to the days of when Billboard actually mattered, the charts mattered, gold and platinum record sales mattered, Casey Kasem's American Top 40 mattered. Again, February the 10th, 1942, Glenn Miller and his orchestra got the first gold record ever for the song Chattanooga Choo Choo. Now, there's already people out there having aneurysms going, no, no, that's not right. It was a publicity stunt. Somebody spray painted a copy of the album gold. Again, a PR stunt just to have some fun. But here's the thing that most of you probably did not know. That publicity stunt back in 1942, and I will use the word steal. Again, I already did my disclaimer. This is my opinion. But from what I've read, the Recording Industry Association of America stole this idea from this publicity stunt involving Chattanooga Choo Choo. 16 years later, the RIAA trademarked the gold record and awarded the first official gold record. Again, 16 years after this whole stunt with Chattanooga Choo Choo. Some people are being more kind with their words, saying it was borrowed. The idea was borrowed. No, they stole it. They absolutely outright stole it. Great, great story in music history. And of course, as I mentioned, the gold, the platinum status, the diamond status, 10 million copies sold, which we can go back to our conversation about Van Halen. That first Van Halen album is diamond status, 10 million plus sold in North America. But that all used to matter. It all used to seem like it was actually a viable way to judge the popularity of an album or a song. And of course, now it doesn't matter at all because as of the mid 90s, Billboard and the RIAA have basically corrupted and destroyed any meaningful measurement yardstick to discern the popularity of a band, a performer, an album, or a song. Couple birthdays for you before we wrap things up here. Oh, no, I said it too early. Not supposed to say wrap it up until the fourth segment. One of the most tragic birthdays in rock and roll history. And bear with me, because you're sitting there going, how can a birthday be tragic? It's about when said person passed away and how they passed away. February the 10th, 1962 would have been Cliff Burton's birthday, Metallica's bass player from their early days. And of course, most of you out there know how Cliff Burton died. This is why it's a bittersweet, to me, a tragic birthday, because Cliff Burton should only be 3 years older than me right now. Cliff Burton should be 61 years old today. Still alive and kicking. And of course, he died on September the 27th, 1987, again, in one of the most tragic, awful moments in rock history. We recently talked about the day the music died, and nothing's probably going to top that. But when the Metallica tour bus was involved in an accident and Cliff Burton was crushed underneath said tour bus, at the time, I wasn't the biggest Metallica fan in the world, but even when I heard about that the following day, it sent a chill through me, an absolute chill through me, and I felt it. I felt like something was wrong in the rock and roll universe. So even though today would have been his birthday, we should send thoughts and prayers out to Metallica, to the fans, to the family of Cliff Burton. And then finally, February the 10th, 1937, one of the greatest female voices in music history. You can argue it's not really rock and roll, more pop, but you cannot argue with the fact that her voice was phenomenal with big hits in the 70s, especially her signature song, which is haunting and beautiful. Killing Me Softly with His Song. Yes, it is the great Roberta Flack, born on this day in 1937. All right, Doc Brown slapping me on the arm, poking me, saying he wants to drop off of the time stream and get some White Castle. So I guess we're going to have to wrap up segment 3. I did it again. Wrapping up segment 3 so we can get to segment 4, which is, of course, wrap it up. Quick promo break. I'll be right back to let you know about some really good music on the horizon to talk about, reviews for the breakdown segment. I'll be back in about 40 seconds, kids. Well, we hope you enjoyed our trip back in time, looking back at the anniversaries, the classic moments in rock and roll history. But of course, the DeLorean works both ways. So now we have to move forward. The last segment here, as always, on the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane. Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. It's all about the future. What's coming out here in the next month or two? What songs? What albums? What concert tours? That's why we call it Wrap It Up. Thanks to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Thanks to you for hanging out. Here comes our final segment. All right, now's the time when I can officially, legitimately say it is time to wrap it up on the Fortress of Rock, episode 78, February the 10th, 2023. I am the Maestro Kevin Crane. Of course, wrap it up. Our tribute to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Looking ahead, as we just looked back in the last segment, now we look ahead. And again, as I mentioned earlier, there is light at the end of the rock and roll tunnel. Next week, you are getting a concert review. Finally. It's been a couple months, and this one's big. I will have my review of Red, Mammoth WVH, and Alter Bridge live at the Murat in Indianapolis, Indiana. Cannot wait to pass that review along to you. It has been too long. If I don't get a concert every 2 or 3 months, I get withdrawal. I'm telling you. And it's probably going to get worse because I don't have anything on the horizon from mid-February through till, I believe, June or July. So I'm going to get the rock and roll shakes here, kids. But this show will be my fix to get me through until late spring and early summer. New albums. Of course, I whined a little bit in segment 2 about how there's been a lack of new music. That's about to come to an end. 2 great albums coming out February the 24th. So, in early March, one Friday after another, we will have reviews of the new albums from Steel Panther. That would be On the Prowl. And, of course, Godsmack, Lighting Up the Sky. Again, both out February the 24th. We will have our reviews for you here on The Fortress in early March. So I'm expecting some new songs here very, very soon. Again, it's been a little dry in terms of trying to dig up new stuff to listen to. So we're going to kind of follow up on the songs that we reviewed here today in segment 2. We had the Hold Steady, of course, and we had Peter Gabriel. So we're going to do the follow-up singles, the follow-up releases for both the Hold Steady and Peter Gabriel here in the next few weeks. The second single from The Price of Progress, the Hold Steady, their second release is Sixers. And Peter Gabriel's second release from I/O is The Court. And I'm sure he'll have both a dark side and a bright side mix. We also are still looking at reviewing that new LA Guns song I mentioned last week, You Betray. Now, I did want to make note of one album I've been talking about, and I've reviewed a couple of the songs off of it, but I can't review the full album. I've listened to almost half of it here with singles, chunks, Spotify recommendations. That would be that Vi Gash release that we've talked a lot about here on the Fortress of Rock over the last few months. We reviewed a couple songs, but I have got to be honest with you. Listening to these singles and all these other songs that have popped up over the last few weeks, the project, of course, Steve Vai and Johnny Sombrado, going all the way back to the early 90s, it just does not appeal to me. And I can't, again, waste my limited time on this earth listening to an album I know I'm not going to like. That's why we have singles. That's why we have these releases. Thank God for the release radar on Spotify. I'm not necessarily trying to pimp them, but it's not perfect. But I get to listen to these songs, and there are some new bands that I have discovered through the Spotify release radar, and now there are albums like this where I know I should stay away. So I am not going to be doing a review of Vi Gash. Sorry, kids. The guitar work doesn't even really sound like Steve Vai. And again, I know I don't necessarily want show-off guitar work, but it just sounds like the worst Poison cover band of all time. That's the first thing that pops into my head thinking about what I've heard so far from Vigash, and that's judging it off of basically about half of the album, which I think is a very fair segment to be able to base an opinion off of. But so hopefully something else will pop up. There's a band called the Carburetors out there we're looking into. Black Star Riders. We're going to have a new song from them, potentially, maybe, with a new album. They could be somebody we could review here eventually on the Fortress. So, again, very disheartened when the Rival Sons postponed their new album, Dark Fighter, all the way back to June. I was really looking forward to that. That was supposed to come out in March, I believe. We've got Metallica in April. We'll get there. We'll get to summer. We'll get to the concert reviews every week. New albums, hopefully, every week. But if anything, the stuff we've been able to pull up, dig up, and review should prove to you, above all else, rock and roll is not dead. There is still stuff out there. Interesting stuff to listen to. Classic acts, new bands. We will find the good stuff, the bad stuff, and here on the Fortress, we'll let you know about all of it. Have a great Super Bowl weekend. Enjoy the big game. I will. I already got some wings set up, maybe some poppers, fresh jalapeno poppers with cream cheese and a variety of other cheese sprinkled on top. Love the Super Bowl. The game doesn't always turn out great. My team's never in it. But hope you enjoy your Sunday. Be safe. Be careful. Do not drink and drive. Pick somebody in your family or among your friends to cart your drunk butt back and forth from your home or apartment. And then, of course, I would be remiss if I did not mention Valentine's Day coming up this Tuesday, the 14th. And I will quote, like I do most every week, the song from Stephen Stills. If you can't be with the one you love, honey, love the one you're with. I'm the Maestro. Again, have a great week with Super Bowl, Valentine's Day. I've got Alter Bridge and Mammoth WVH. Everything's good. We should all be covered and have fun. And I will see you on Friday, February the 17th. Take care, everybody.